From Del Rio, Texas, home of Lake Amistad, your host, Rob Wade. This guy who dives. This episode of This Guy Who Dives, recorded live Saturday, 24 October 2015, episode 145. That's just cold. Well, here we are once again, everyone, with another exciting episode of This Guy Who Dives, and I am, of course, your host, Rob Wade, and as you see, we're still looking for a potential guest host to join us here on the show. So again, as we've been putting out there for the last several months, if you're a diver in the local Del Rio area and you'd like to try your hand at this, even at just guesting one time, I'd love to have you on the set here on the humble abode of Ceti Fox Productions and join us in a production of the show. It's really easy to do, and you might try it. You might like it, as they say. So it's been a very busy week. As you probably noticed, if you watched last week, you saw that we had a rebroadcast of a show from last year, which was kind of chosen specifically because it was a similar show to one that we were doing the weekend before a big event that we have. This is a festive time of the year, as they say, in Del Rio, because we celebrate a number of events going on. Fiesta de Amistad is one of them. We also have big events that that are all part of this whole annual celebration. It's kicked off typically by the Miss Del Rio USA pageant, which, if you have been watching previous shows, you're aware that our own beloved Courtney Jones, who was Miss Del Rio for the past year, having a difficult time speaking tonight, relinquished her crown to her successor, and so she gets to go back to being an ordinary civilian. But and of course she enjoyed it, but I'm sure she is equally glad to get back to some sort of normalcy, back to regular job and all that fun stuff. And so congratulations to her for a successful reign as Miss Del Rio. The title of the episode this week is That's Just Cold, because we're going to be talking a little bit, among other things, we'll be talking about preparing for cold water diving. I say that with a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The nice thing about living in Del Rio is that our weather typically stays warmer longer. This means that the dive season is a little bit longer than in a lot of other places in the country, in the continental U.S. Now, obviously, you could dive anywhere, anytime if you got the appropriate equipment, and certainly you could go to places that are more to your liking as far as diving is concerned, if you choose to. A lot of people take dive trips to tropical waters during the winter. Tara's first saltwater dive was during a shore excursion to Grand Cayman, when we took our first cruise, Caribbean cruise together. And so she got to, and of course we did this during basically Christmas time, which was kind of awesome. But of course, everywhere else it was cold, but down, where we were going, it was gorgeous. It was absolutely beautiful. So, and then she had a spectacular time for her first open water dive in Grand Cayman. We came out of a little finger cove there, and it was a fairly easy swim out. And basically, once you got out from the cove, you could go either left or right. And the first dive we went left. For the second dive we went right. spectacular visibility, spectacular sights. Right off the bat, we came on a coral mound where there were a bunch of tarpon, and it was just fantastic. For a great first saltwater experience for her. Excuse me while I'm also a little bit distracted resetting up some things on my Surface Pro 3. I had a bunch of updates loaded, and of course, as luck would have it, at least one of those updates required a reboot of the device, and it took longer than normal for it to reboot. I'd heard that there were some significant updates coming, and I just was like, well, darn. You got John in the chat room out there. Good to see you out there in the chat room. Hope you enjoy the show. And, we still got to get you in on the program. You've been talking about joining us for an episode, and we need to work that out with you, which will be pretty cool. Yeah, it looks like we may have another lurker out there in the audience too, just an anonymous, but finally get to the internet that can stream. Nice. Technology is always good as long as you can get decent technology, get access to decent technology. That's often a challenge when you're in countries or areas where service is spotty at best. So, it's I've been on places where frustratingly you just simply can't get a really great connection, which I really hate to deal with. As a matter of fact, when we did our trip to Belize, the connection was so bad that we just simply had to record the show live and upload it later because it was horrible connection. Great place, loved the place we were staying and where we were diving, but it was just tough because our internet connection was so horrible. So. All right, so again, welcome, John. Hope you enjoy the show, and I'll be looking for your comments, questions as we go along. You may find some of this. Pardon me while I get one of our dogs up here. I'm now sitting here with 3 dogs. Let me switch to the camera. You can kind of see what I'm dealing with here. Yeah. So you can see behind me, I have Vala and Ronan behind me, and then I've got Greza jumping up here in my lap. And now you can probably hear in the background, Chiana is barking at something. I need to try and get her attention, get her to stop. Really gets annoying. The weather has been kind of, it's been horrible. Well, let me rephrase that. Well, let me qualify that. It's been horrible for me as a diver. I enjoy the sunny, hot weather. But, of course, it is late October, and temperature's starting to drop, and we start getting more wetness coming down from the sky. And so it's been raining pretty heavily the last day or so, which means probably visibility is going to go right through the tubes because everything's washing in. I mean, it's been a pretty good soaker that we've received so far. Of course, anybody trying to keep a lawn or grow anything is really excited to have the rain. And of course, as I mentioned, this week was a number of events going on. We had the yours truly was part of the again, as I have been for many years, part of the abrazo, or the embrace, the hug of friendship that happens every year during Fiesta de Amistad. They have, and on the Friday of the week of the whole Fiesta de Amistad festivities, we have people, dignitaries from Mexico and from the United States, all gathered together. Typically, it's at the Amistad International Dam, and we meet at the center where there's big big statue of the eagle of Mexico and the eagle of the United States, and they have the national anthems for both countries. And each year they swap who does it first. This year, the United States did it first. And of course, I've been humbly honored with the task of singing the national anthem with our local junior high band, which has been pretty awesome. I only see their director this time every year, but have a great relationship with him as far as that goes. He's very, very gifted and a very nice man, and I always like talking with him when we have these events. But again, it went off without a hitch. Now, what was different this year, for some reason, they moved the event from the International Dam to a place called Brown Plaza down in Old Town of Del Rio. And so it was kind of interesting. To be honest, it was a little bit ghetto kind of, that area is just not well kept up. And it was a little bit disorganized, but still, everybody knows why they're there. And so the enthusiasm was still there, and everybody was, looking forward to participating. And I was as well. Now, another interesting change to this year was different from past years, where when Mexico's national anthem is presented, they normally have had on their side of the line, they've had a full band setup, a combination of what am I looking for? Traditional band, with horn section, etc., but also electric instruments. So they bring out everything. So they have bass guitar and regular guitar and everything. And then a gentleman is singing the national anthem along with the music as they present their colors. This year, they did not have the benefit of the band coming over, but they did have a young gentleman who sang their national anthem a cappella, much the way that I do, or when Tara and I do the duet version. The way we do is typically a cappella. And over the years, while I certainly I'm not a Spanish speaker, I can sing it if I have it. I've done a couple songs in Spanish. And I can read it, pronouncing everything correctly. I won't know mostly what I'm saying, although I can discern some of it because basic Latin and Greek, roots that I've studied. But I've become familiar enough with the Mexican national anthem that that I'm familiar with how it goes. I don't have it memorized or anything, but I know the melody line, and it's not an easy song to do a cappella. Ours is challenging because it was basically the tune itself started as a drinking song. So it goes all over the map, which is why it's difficult for a lot of people to do correctly and do well, because the tune was not ever meant to be sung sober. But the Mexican national anthem has a few challenges because of how it does go melodically. It's challenging because of switching to minor keys and things like that. So I had to give the young man, good grief, Greza. I had to give the young man props, and I congratulate him on a job well done. He did a splendid job of keeping on key, which would be easy to go off key given the way their national anthem goes. But I shook his hand afterward and said, "Excellent job." So and so then he had to he got a couple of selfies taken with us together, which was kind of neat. So I kind of would prefer, I liked his voice better. So I kind of hope he ends up being the guy that does it in future years, as long as they still keep asking me to do represent the United States. So it was an honor, and glad to do it. And a great time was had by all, as they say. Let's hit one of our normal little tracks. Now, I mentioned before that I was not interested in seeing this movie, but we finally broke down because it got so many great comments from people that we trust. I've said before, I can't stand Ben Affleck or his cohort in crime, Matt Damon. Can't stand them. They're like nails on a chalkboard for me. So I was going to see this movie in spite of him, because the story of how the movie came about, how the actual book came about upon which this movie was based, is very fascinating. I won't bore you with the details of it, but if you are interested to see how this book came about and ultimately the movie did, look it up on the internet. It's pretty interesting how it was how the guy came up with all this. I would give it a 7. Some of the effects were good, or the good. CGI always works out well if they spend some time with it. There's some language in it. I would have much rather seen Mark Wahlberg in this role. Absolutely, hands down, Mark Wahlberg would have been the much better actor to be in this role. Yeah, I would have really enjoyed this movie more. I was okay with. If Matt Damon's character had died on Mars, I'd been okay with that. But it was kind of a good, basically a good story. It adhered fairly well, as I understand, to the book. But there were a number of things that, I'm sorry, they either took cinematic license with, or artistic license with, or they're just flat out, blatantly, okay, we just got to get from point A to point B, and we're going to break what realistically would happen. We're going to defy what would realistically happen. And it all involves basically towards the last part. So, yeah, again, as with so many science fiction movies, if you're willing to suspend disbelief, this would be okay movie to see. Like I said, I give it a 7 because I couldn't stand his acting. But most of the other things about the movie were fun to watch. It was the timing was good, and by timing I mean the pace of the movie. They didn't make you, because this story covers over a year's time. Obviously, you can't sit there and watch everything going on in real time or somewhat close to real time. So, they skipped you through different points, and you had just assumed that was a lot of routine that he was going through to survive. So, decent movie, not one I will go buy. A lot of movies that we go see are typically good enough that we'll go buy it and put it in our library. This is not one of those, but I didn't feel like I totally wasted my money going to see it. So again, I would give it a 7. Speaking of things that we like to watch, we watch a lot of science fiction type shows, and it's always frustrating when you see shows that are well done, or in your opinion are well done. Their storyline captivates you, the characters captivate you, and then they cancel the show, or they decide they're done with the show. And one of the things that frustrates me about a lot of series now is they seem to, back in the day, they used to do like 23, 28 episodes. Now they're doing like 13, 16, 18 episodes per season, and then you don't see them again for an entire year. You don't even typically see reruns. What some had started doing for a while, which I actually kind of liked, was they would show you a few episodes, new episodes, and then they would show you those episodes in rerun. And then they would show the next few new episodes and then show you those in rerun. I was okay with that because basically then that spread the season out throughout almost the whole year. So there was very little time during the summer where you weren't watching either a rerun or new show. But now what they seem to be doing is just doing fewer episodes, calling it a season, and then finishing for an entire year. So this year saw the final season, although it was a very, very short season, of Falling Skies. I really liked that show, and I thought they could have done more with it, but again, it went bye-bye. But at least they had an ending to it. Similarly, Continuum, which was a long-awaited season, it was their final season. But it was only like 6 episodes. They might as well just call it a mini series. It ended okay. I was disappointed with the final twist. Continuum fans generally really liked it. I was just disappointed. They could have given it a really good ending, a totally buttoned up good ending, but they chose not to. So I was kind of frustrated with that. On the other hand, they have other shows that have just flat out got canceled. And I usually, this is Sci-Fi Channel that does this. I just get so frustrated with Sci-Fi Channel because they get their hands on a good show and then they ruin it almost every time. So what they've done now is Defiance was on for like 3 seasons. It sort of had, well, I thought it was a cliffhanger ending. Well, as it turns out, now they've decided not to renew the series, and so that was basically the ending. And it's just ridiculous. So, Sci-Fi Channel, you suck, and you ruined yet another series for me. So Defiance will not be coming back. Dominion is another series that I kind of gave it. I had to give it some time to. I had to give it some time to gel for me because, being a Christian, they were basically taking. They were taking the concepts of angels and devil and God, and they were kind of taking a page from Supernatural, and they were twisting a lot of things that are described in the Bible, turning them way on their head, and just flat out wrong things. But generally speaking, it was entertaining if you totally suspend your understanding as a Christian of Scripture. And they were really setting up some nice little potential storylines, and they had a great cliffhanger at the end, and it's not being renewed. So Dominion is out the door. Now, another series that I caught as it was just finishing, so I was catching it on Hulu Plus. I'm just typing something here. It was American Odyssey, and it was aside, if you put aside as a conservative, you put aside the fact that it was clearly a slam against big corporate America and government and stuff like that. It was an interesting story that could happen, and there were some things going on in it during it that I was like, oh, really? Would they be that shallow? But then I realized probably yes. But it had a good kind of cliffhanger ending for the season, and now I find out that they're not renewing that show as well. So once again, shows that we're interested in, they are just killing off. Meanwhile, Sci-Fi Channel keeps on such stupid things as wrestling and ghost chasers, whatever it is, paranormal witness, and junk like that. What are you people watching? How are any of those interesting at all? It just amazes me. So anyway, very frustrated with seeing shows that I've really gotten into not carrying on. Let's see. Tech news. We have yet another tech preview for Windows 10 and Windows 10 Mobile. They had some issues with. They had basically a Windows 10 Mobile preview release, 2 within a week of each other. But the first one, if you wanted it, you had to drop back to Windows Phone 8.1, then load up to rejoin the Windows Insider program, do the fast ring choice, fast ring updates, and then you had to install the Windows 10 preview. And they were humming along saying, hey, we think we've got a really good one. And, oh, by the way, it's still got that same issue, but if you want it, and we're adding some features, if you want it, you again have to drop back to 8.1. Otherwise, you wait till next Tuesday to get this update. So, to be honest, I went ahead and I dropped it back to 8.1 and installed the new update 105.7.2. And here a couple of things that does for me. It gives me a clean operating system. Anytime you refresh a machine, it's always a good idea. But it also gave me a chance to be reminded how smooth and how fast and how much better Windows Phone 8 is on the hardware compared to Windows 10 Mobile. I still maintain, even after this latest build, Windows 10 Mobile only does well on fast hardware. If you've got the cheaper hardware, which is all that Microsoft is really putting out these days, then it runs horribly. It's slow. It's got a huge delay. Cortana is a disaster on the Lumia 635 for sure. When I run it, it takes forever to get a response. Cortana just takes forever to answer something, do something. You hear an alert go off, and then 5, 10, 30 seconds later, she comes back and says, do you want to read it? Do you want to reply? Blah, blah. It's just horrible. You know what? I should probably just show you some examples here. Let me switch to my close-up camera. This is going to be kind of challenging to do because of... Oh, that was interesting. Because of the glare on the screen, but I'm going to try. All right, so here we got the 2, and I'm going to do this one, and go back to start screen, and go back to here. Okay, so here's the 2. Now, one of the things that I don't like about, one of the many things I don't like about Windows 10 Mobile is, you see here, look, and this is Windows 10 Mobile, this is Windows 8.1. I don't like how crushed together the tiles are. I like a judicious use of white space. Also, it's much slower, as you can see. And let me pull up where's the calendar? All right, let's look at the difference in the calendar. It's kind of hard to tell. On the calendar here, and as this is true with all the live tiles, the font is much more readable. It's like an eye chart on Windows 10 Mobile. And these are same size screens. This is my 1020 and this is the 635. Also, I much prefer, I think on the live tiles, where it shows you outstanding messages, looking on the Windows Phone 8, if you look, the 99 that's showing by my Outlook mail, much easier to read than the stupid tiny little numbers that are on the email flags for Windows Phone 10 or Windows 10 Mobile. So again, this is just among the many reasons why this is just so bad. I could go down a long list of reasons why it's bad, but those are just some of the initial in-your-face examples. It's hard to read. And as you get older, I have to wear my reading glasses, so it's important to be able to see. And so they've got some serious work to do, but they think they're close to having it ready. I beg to differ. Let's see. Oh, and in the update, they said they felt they figured out why the battery usage was so horrible on the last build of Windows 10 Mobile. They said it was because Cortana is on. You have to turn Cortana off. But then they said they fixed it with this update. Newsflash, they didn't fix it. I get normal usage. I can get a full day out of my 1020. I can maybe get 4 hours out of the 635. Maybe 4 hours. And I have to have it on the charger. So I basically I hardly ever have it off the charger. It's basically if I'm carrying it around. But if I'm in the office, I have it plugged in. If I'm at home, I have it plugged in. Because that's the only way that thing's going to give me enough juice to do anything. So I'm just tremendously disappointed in every respect with Windows 10 Mobile. They've got a long way to go to make this thing acceptable. So, all right. I had a birthday this past week, or the week before. Turned 53. I know it's hard to believe. I look like I'm only 40. I'm just kidding. But I feel great. I'm enjoying life. My wife keeps me young, and what can I say? Let's see. Oh, a bit of trivia. I found out something that was interesting. The term skin diving actually is an acronym. It came from the military, believe it or not. When military personnel were required to bring their mask, fins, snorkel to a water session, for various training, especially special forces type stuff, the instructors would post on the roster and would say, okay, here's what's going on, here's where you got to be. They would simply put skin, which meant swim kit is needed. SKIN, swim kit is needed. So that's where the term skin diving actually came from. The military is swim kit is needed. So I thought that was a little bit of interesting new information. So you can file that away in your little metal trap of a mind there. The Christ of the Abyss turns 50, and that's a really cool statue to dive on if you've been to Key Largo. It was sunk there intentionally in 1965. It was a gift to the United States, and it's a replica of the same sculpture by Italian sculptor Guido Galletti. I guess that's how you pronounce it, which is sunk off of Portofino, Italy. And so I actually have a couple of pictures. Here is one of our trips to Key Largo. There's Tara with the Christ of the Abyss. This thing is 9 feet tall. And let's see if I can skip to the next one. There we go. There's yours truly. And then let me play just a little bit of video. Go, please. Pardon the camera. This is our original Intova, which we still have. IC10. And it would do this weird thing of trying to adjust the backlight or the white balance. And of course you see what it does, and you hear the remnants. But still, it's video of the dive. There's a couple of other divers hanging about there, getting some pictures. There's Tara. So that is the Christ of the Abyss. And it's a pretty cool statue to say you've been. That's just kind of like one of those things where if you go to Key Largo, you kind of have to do that dive. So it turns 50, so that's amazing. It's hard to believe it's been down there that long. But I guess 1965, that'd be the case. So let's see. Again, the episode title today is That's Just Cold. And it's so that we were going to talk about how you prepare for cold water diving. Now, it's still going to be a little bit before we have cold water here at Lake Amistad, but it is starting to drop some. I did a dive last weekend, and I wish I'd brought my camera because visibility in many places had started to open up, because as the temperature starts to drop, a number of things happen, one of which is potentially, depending on where you're at, the algae blooms start to die off, so visibility starts to go up. Now, there are other particulates that can be in the water to make the dive not as enjoyable, but it started to open up. And now I did go ahead and wear my 5 mil full wetsuit because I knew I was going to go deeper. And because the season this year started getting warm so late, the lake never did warm up at a depth, at its normal depth, as warm as it normally does. So we started noticing, where we're noticing the thermal climb had changed, had flipped right at about 65 feet. Well, now that's starting to change. It's getting a little bit shallower because the water temperature is starting to drop. And so I knew if I was going to go below that, or certainly below 50 feet, I needed to have something a little warmer than a 3 mil shorty. So I did go ahead and wear my 5 mil full, and I was very, very comfortable. Very, very comfortable. I just wish I had brought my camera that time, and I didn't, and I apologize because I would show you the video of it. But the lake level has begun, or of course it was before all this rain. The lake level had started to drop. It was about a foot low compared to the week before. So I'm kind of disappointed to see that, although that does mean if it continues to drop, that means they might reopen Spur 454, which is a place I'd really rather dive at this point. But we'll see how that goes, and I'll certainly keep you all posted, especially those of you who are interested in diving in the local area. And so anyway, I ran into, we have a new person in our office who, she and her husband are both divers, but they come from up north, and so they're actually used to diving in cold water. And I said, oh, well, then you do a lot of dry suit diving. They said, well, no, we do thick wetsuits. I'm like, oh, okay, well then you just let me know when you guys are ready to hit the water, and we'll go out there. I've got plenty of gear and all that stuff. So I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity for me to kind of share some of the highlights, how you prepare, things to consider as you look to diving maybe in colder water. Don't sell yourself short. Don't miss out on potentially great diving because it's colder. Sure, it's not nearly as enjoyable from a physical comfort standpoint to go in colder water, but you can certainly get the proper training for dry suit diving and enjoy it. But you can still enjoy it even if you have a thicker wetsuit. You just have to. There's some things you need to be aware of, and so we thought we would just share a few of those things with you. So here's something to understand about diving in general. You need to understand. One of the things you need to make sure you do is understand where you're diving. East Coast diving is warmer than West Coast diving in the Northern Hemisphere. Diving further south isn't necessarily warmer because, for instance, you may be diving in an area which is spring-fed, which may be a constant temperature. If we go out diving in San Felipe Creek, you can dive it in the dead of winter, and it's actually a pretty warm dive because it's 76 degrees year-round. But if you go out to the lake, it's going to be in the dead of winter. It's going to be 50 degrees. Now, you may go up north and be actually around areas that are affected by geothermal heating. And so you may actually find some warmer dives in the northern U.S. compared to the southern U.S. So don't make an automatic assumption that the further south you go, the warmer the water is going to be. You need to know more about where you're diving. Now, I've got up on the screen here a picture of how the typical ocean currents work across the globe. And you see the blue arrows are the colder water and the red arrows are the warmer water. Now notice on our east coast, the Atlantic Ocean is typically warmer water going up along the east coast. Why? Because of the ocean currents going all clockwise in the northern hemisphere. Okay, notice that the southern hemisphere, the ocean currents typically go counterclockwise. Now, what does that mean? That means that water that's cruising, and look at the Atlantic Ocean, for example, you'll see that water that is heated up at the equator then circulates upward in the clockwise fashion. So that's why we have typically the hurricanes that come through, is they push into the Caribbean or they push up along the eastern seaboard. And so that's all warmer water. And then it goes up to the Arctic region and then starts to cool down. And then it comes down down along the European coast, and that's where it's colder water. So that's why if you dive in any given time of the year along the East Coast or the Caribbean, that water is going to be warmer. But contrary to what you might think, going diving in California is cold water. And as you can see on our Pacific coast, that's because of the clockwise motion. The warm water that came up along from Hawaii and Japan, the Asian coast, then hits the Arctic and works its way back down along our Pacific coast region, and that's colder water. So you typically find people diving in dry suits or really thick wetsuits on the western coast, where it's all warmer diving on the eastern coast. And then you see pretty much the reverse is true in the southern hemisphere. So understanding where you're going and why the water temperature may be what it is, so you can be better prepared. So that's one of the key things in preparing for cold water diving, is to understand where you are diving. Now, the next thing you need to be aware of is that you use the right equipment. Now, you need to look for equipment that's designed for cold, that's designed to handle the colder temperatures. And a key component, of course, is the regulator. You kind of get what you pay for with regulators. Now, none of them are life endangering, unless there's just a flaw that typically would cause a recall. But generally speaking, even an inexpensive regulator is going to be fine for you, unless you're going to be going into more challenging conditions that would put a greater demand on the operation of the components of that regulator. If you're going to be doing exceptional amounts of deep diving, you might want to invest in a little bit better, higher end regulator. Certainly, if you're going to be going scuba diving in cold water, you need to look at one that the components are tuned to adapt, to adjust, to compensate for that cold water. A consideration is that free flowing of the regulator is at a higher risk in cold water because of the way the components work. So you want to make sure you pick a regulator that is that the manufacturer has designed to work well even in cold water, because obviously that's life support equipment. So you want to make sure you can breathe no matter the conditions that you're dealing with. So picking the right equipment is important. Also, getting used to hood and gloves. They take some getting used to because of the constricting effect of hoods, and you lose articulation, dexterity, sense of touch in gloves. It's a lot more difficult to work your dive computer, to make adjustments to your mask, things like that, when you're wearing gloves. And if you get the wrong size hood, it may not fit close enough, just like your wetsuit. It may not fit close enough to keep you properly warm, because guess where we lose most of our heat? It's through the old cabeza. So you have to make sure that the hood fits well. If you have it too tight, it can be constricting around the throat, and that can actually start that can cause your heart rate to speed up because you're constricting. It's like pressing down on your thumb over the end of a water hose. It makes it come out faster and stronger, but it also can create a constriction that could cause a number of physiological problems for you. So proper fitting is also important. So, so as again, what you want to make sure is that you are using the right equipment. Now, the next thing you have to be aware of is changes in your diving. Now, here's the thing. No two divers are the same, and no diver is the same on any two dives, even if you've gone diving in a place over and over and over. It's your body adjusts, adapts, or doesn't to cold water different ways. And there are things that you can do to help your body be ready for what's going on. One thing that's an absolute fact is air consumption almost always increases markedly when you're diving in cold water. Also, you need to practice some of the skills that you normally would take for granted in normal warmer water diving. Practice your air sharing. Again, more difficult to work through those skills when you've got additional things like gloves, hood, etc. So practicing those, mask clearing and removal, you can only imagine how much more challenging mask removal or clearing is when you have a hood on. Now, some people will wear, and I don't recommend one way or the other. There's advantages either way. Some will wear their mask inside their hood so that the strap goes inside the hood, and you could still typically clear it, but you're not going to have as much flexibility because the strap is underneath the hood and is behind your head. And then others will wear the mask over the hood, which means it facilitates removing it easier, but it also is it can be more challenging to get a proper seal. So getting used to that. Also, depending on the type of hood you have, it may come down lower, and so you may have a more difficult time manipulating the mask to get it to properly rest underneath the skirt, to rest underneath the lip of the hood, so you get a good seal and you don't have water constantly leaking into the mask. So getting used to those things. You may want to, because it's so cold, you may decide that you want to get trained for dry suit, or you may decide you want to do dry suit diving. Well, there's special training that goes with that, because there's special buoyancy compensation that you need to be aware of, because it has its own valve and control similar to your BC. So there's a number of things that you need to be prepared for as far as getting ready for your diving. Also, understanding hypothermia. Diving in cold water means that any part of you that's exposed can be negatively affected by the temperature drop. Now, when I dive out here at Lake Amistad in the middle of winter, I'm wearing a 7 mil full wetsuit, 7 mil hood, gloves, boots. But I'll be honest with you, even though the rest of me may be comfortable enough to do the dive, the part of me that's exposed is right here, because I have the hood on, I have the mask on, which is covering my face and my nose, but the only thing I have is a regulator in my mouth. So that means all of this that's not covered by the hood or the mask, excuse me, is exposed directly to the cold. And I tell you, at the end of a 45 minute dive in 50-degree water, your lips are cold. You have a hard time articulating because you just don't want to move. So you've got to understand hypothermia and its effects on you, and more specifically, that it can affect your ability to make smart decisions. So it's kind of like the thing that you have to be concerned with in deep diving, where nitrogen narcosis may be a factor. Because it's not the diving deep that messes with you. It's the effect of nitrogen narcosis that makes you make stupid decisions, stupid choices that can be fatal. So hypothermia can be fatal, but it also can be fatal simply because as you get colder, the brain's ability to process becomes suspect, and you could make bad decisions. So be aware, understand, read up on the effects of hypothermia, especially where diving is concerned. Let's see. Next we have, switching screen. Get acclimated slowly. Now, under normal warm water circumstances, you can go ahead and do a giant stride into the water. But guess what? Your body will adjust much better to going into cold water if you simply lower yourself into the water slowly. Shore diving makes this pretty easy generally, because you can just lower yourself in at a slow pace, letting your suit warm up, because the water gets into the suit and then your body heats that up. So, you can imagine if you jump in the water quickly And so it hasn't had a chance to, your body hasn't had a chance to warm up the water getting into the suit, and then you immediately start dropping. Guess what? Not only is your body getting shocked by the cold, you're already dropping down. So the insulating effect of the neoprene becomes less as you dive deeper, because guess what happens? It's compressing. So all those little honeycombs in neoprene that trap the water that your body heats up, that compresses, which means you have a thinner layer and thinner layer and thinner layer. The deeper you go, a thinner layer of insulating material and water between you and the 50-degree water. So it's much safer on the body and easier to get acclimated if you get into the water slowly. Resist the urge to just giant stride into the water and jump in and get on the dive. Let yourself get used to that. And it will allow your breathing to stabilize. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning, you almost always have a marked increase in your air consumption. Well, you can reduce that increase simply by having your body be more prepared for the dive by getting into the water more slowly. And next we have, wish I could expand this. When diving is done, warm up. Now this seems like it'd be a really obvious thing, but you want to have a process in place by which you warm up. Okay? What you want to do is make sure that you have warm, dry clothes that you can switch into, that you can change into, that you could dry off quickly and get into. Also, having some more warm liquid to drink is a good idea. When we were, I think it was Curacao. No, it was Grand Cayman. We did a night dive, and it was a little chilly in the evening. And what was cool was they had some snacks, and they had warm cocoa as we got out of the water, because, you know, night falls and the temperature does drop a bit. So we had a great time with the dive, but we were able to warm up pretty quickly because we had warm clothes, we had towels, we had warm liquids to drink. So plan appropriately for getting out of the water. In other words, don't just spend all your time planning for getting into the water and the dive itself. Make sure you plan your exit properly. So that means warm up. Get your core temperature up as quickly as possible so that you recover quicker and that you have less chance of maybe some decompression sickness, because it's been proven that you're more susceptible to DCS when you dive in cold water or strenuous conditions. It leaves you open to be more susceptible on a dive that you normally may not be susceptible to DCS, even though you followed all the rules. So make sure you have a proper plan for getting out of the water. Now, fortunately, we have our mobile dive shop, our dive trailer. And so, for instance, using this example, real world, my former co-host and I, Robert, several years ago, we went diving for the city of Del Rio in February to help them install a third nozzle to the local spring that feeds our water supply. So what had happened, short version of the story, they were trying to install it. They lowered the nozzle and accidentally knocked loose a couple of huge boulders into the spring, and nearly blocked it off. And they certainly couldn't get the third nozzle in place with these rocks in the way. So they hired us to come on board to go out there and help them. They brought a crane in, chains and straps, and we were supposed to strap the crane to these things so they could lift them out of the water, which we were able to do, but it was a lot of work. But thankfully, since this was San Felipe Spring, it's constant temperature 76. So even though we were in our 7 mil full, etc., the water was actually quite warm. We were quite warm in the water. 7 mil wetsuit in 76 degree water you're going to break a sweat. But getting out, it was 45 degrees. It was cold. I was so glad that I had the trailer there, because as soon as we got out, we were able to run to the trailer, close the doors, and be protected from the wind and dry off and warm up and get our core temperature up. So plan appropriately for the end of the dive, because you don't want to have anything complicate what was otherwise a potentially enjoyable dive. Okay, so when diving is done, make sure that you warm up. And then last but not least, experience. Experience is a great teacher. There are plenty of people who have spent a lot of time diving in colder water. I refer to the new person in our office. She and her husband, that's all the diving they've been doing is cold water. So I would, even though I've got a lot more dives under my belt than they have, I certainly am going to pick their brain on anything, any tricks, tips they have from their experience diving in cold water, since that's the only diving that they've done is cold water. So connect yourself with folks, use the internet, talk to people you know that are divers, find out if they've had a lot of experience diving in cold water, and get tips from them. They may have some really cool ideas to, as far as prep for the dive, the dive itself, as well as the post-dive activities. So let experience be a teacher and find those people that have experienced that. Okay. So just to recap, preparing for a cold water dive, you want to understand where you're diving, understand that water temperature you need to find out from locals, from the internet, whatever your resource is going to be, what the water is like that you're going to be diving into. Then you want to make sure you're using the right equipment. Okay, and that may be thicker wetsuits, hood, gloves, dry suit, whatever is appropriate. Making sure you have a regulator and any other equipment that might fail or be challenged by cold water. Lights. Cold water, cold air can affect your lights, can affect battery life. So make sure you've got fresh batteries. I would strongly suggest investing in LED lights for a number of reasons. One, they're lighter typically because they typically don't require as much battery, and they're going to be much more frugal on battery usage than a halogen light, for instance. So if you're diving in colder water, you have a better chance of having a longer burn time for your flashlights, or as they say in Europe, your torch. So use the right equipment. Also be ready for changes in your diving. There are things that you have to be aware of that happens to your body, and things that you need to change or practice, such as mask clearing and removal skills, shared air diving skills, etc., that are challenged because you're diving in cold water and wearing gear that can be restrictive. Get acclimated slowly. Don't just jump in the water. Let your body get used to it so that your breathing is less labored and you can have a more enjoyable dive. When your diving is done, make sure you warm up. Have a plan for how you're going to warm up. And then, again, find those who have experience in diving in cold water and get some tips from them. That will help you have a much, much more enjoyable time with your dive. I see John is catching up with me. A lot of comments just now in the... Okay, so John has a topic question. He said, a couple of months ago, went on a deep dive with an experienced diver. Went to 120 feet pretty quickly, feeling a little loopy. Dropped my camera and just focused, but went about 8 minutes. Let's see. Things got better as it then slowly started our ascent. Nitrogen narcosis or just going deep too fast. Well, and John, you're exactly right. That was nitrogen narcosis. If you are not used to doing deep dives, especially, what happens is your body is going to be more susceptible to, generally speaking, there's no hard and fast rule to this, but you're generally speaking going to be more susceptible to nitrogen narcosis. The only experience I've had with it, because I've done a lot of deep dives and they've all been gradual, or I say early on, my early experience with deep dives have all been very gradual. The only experience I've had personally with nitrogen narcosis was a few years ago. Robert and I were on a dive in an area that we call the Abyss, and it was a night dive. We love night diving out here, and I had my camera. And I was we were down at 130 feet, which is the recreational max. And I found a small cave that was probably just big enough for your head to fit in. But I was looking caves for typically catfish that like to hang in there. So I had my camera ready and I had lights going and everything. So I was concentrating so hard on keeping very steady, not silting up the area, and getting a good shot that I started to feel loopy, as you described. I started to feel loopy, a little bit lightheaded. For those who've never experienced this, nitrogen narcosis gives you a kind of a euphoric feeling similar to getting drunk. The same kinds of excuse me, the same kinds of things are kind of happening to your nervous system that because of nitrogen narcosis, as would be happening because of alcohol. Okay, so that gives you that euphoric feeling. And as I mentioned earlier in the episode, in tonight's episode, it's not necessarily that the nitrogen saturation at that point is deadly itself. It's the decisions that you could potentially make. Let's see. And then John is saying, he got kicked out. Noticed last spring my hood was too loose and fills with air as I exhale. Cold head. That's absolutely true. Because air is a horrible insulator, okay, when it comes to a wetsuit. So which is why you want everything to fit snugly. Not so tight that you feel like you're about to be popped out of the suit. Or as I mentioned earlier with the hood, that you feel constricted here, but you want to make sure that it all fits nice and snug so that air doesn't get in there. Now, I will tell you, it's always a good idea if you've got the choice, when you're selecting a hood, to get one that has a vent on it, typically in the top or the crown. And all it really is it's a flap type of neoprene that doesn't let water in, but if air does get inside your hood, which it could depending on how you're wearing your mask, because typically the mask is worn in such a way where the skirt will be under the lip of the hood. So if it's under that, what happens if you happen to exhale through your nose? If you notice when if you are breathing and you exhale through your nose, most of the time, little trickles of air are going to escape at a point on the upper part of your skirt, which if the upper part of the skirt of your mask is underneath the hood, guess where the air is going? It's going to go into your hood. Even if you've got a tight-fitting hood, the air is going to go in there, and then it's going to want to expand. Well, if you have a hood that has one of those little vents on it, then the air is going to accumulate there and it's going to escape out. So that you're going to have a much less opportunity to run into the cold head because of air collecting in the hood. So great question, John. So back to the nitrogen narcosis. So I started feeling a little loopy at 130 feet because I was concentrating. I was trying to keep a very, very steady breathing so I could have a good shot. And so once I started feeling the effects of the little euphoric effects, I signaled to Robert that I was having a little issue with my head. I said, let's go up a little bit. So we simply came up just a few feet, just a couple, 3 feet was enough. And immediately the euphoric effects dissipated and I was fine. And I'm sure that's what you experienced. As soon as you came back up a little shallower, the effects dissipated. So this is just one more reason to suggest strongly to those of you out there who might be watching, gradually introduce yourself to the deeper diving. Getting the advanced course is important because it's going to give you some exposure to to really seeing what the effects of that nitrogen saturation at depth does to you. You'll see that your calculating skills, your decision making is slower. And once you get on if you get the full on effects of nitrogen narcosis, you could be making really bad decisions like spitting your regulator out or just really doing goofy things that could ultimately hurt you. So make sure that you gradually introduce yourself. Dive a little bit deeper each time as you can. Get the proper training, of course, I always recommend. But again, there's no scuba police out there. So if somebody, an experienced diver, takes you out in that situation, you have to also make sure you communicate to another diver. If they are much more experienced than you, they're going to take a few things for granted that they probably shouldn't. A very conscientious diver, experienced diver, diving with somebody new is going to ask a number of questions about your diving experience. How often do you dive? What's your deepest dive? How frequently do you dive deep? Have you done night? They'll ask you. They should be getting conversation. I mean, that's the whole point about really enjoying diving is when you connect with new people. Going places, see people, meet people, do things. Excuse me. Getting to know other divers is a key part of that, and that should be a fun part of it. Is saying, hey, sharing your experiences and sharing what your opinions on gear and your opinions on dive spots, etc. So have that conversation. Say, hey, by the way, my diving experience has been limited to X, Y, and Z. So if we're going to do something outside of my experience, let's talk that out. So I understand what I'm getting into, and you understand what responsibilities you may have as my dive buddy to take on here, because it's important that you know what the capabilities, the limitations of your dive buddy are. Both of you want to have a great dive, right? So make sure you have those meaningful conversations. We've talked about before the pre-dive safety check, which is no more really than a checklist, but there really should be more to it than that. Just going through, hey, is my BCD all in order? Is everything in place? Are all my releases working correctly? Do I have made sure that nothing is binding the releases? Do I have my air on? Do I have my weights? Am I properly weighted and are my weights in place and secure? And then the final check with your buddy. That's just a mere checklist as a guide, as a set of guidelines to make sure you've got everything in place to do the dive. But really, the pre-dive safety check involves a lot more than that. And it starts earlier than that. It's those conversations with the people you're diving to help you understand how safe the dive is going to be, really, because you may have some hot doggers, some people who, hey, I dive with 2 steel tanks, and I normally just dive by myself because I just don't like diving with the responsibility of other people. I mean, you can run into those kind of dunderheads, okay? So have the conversations with the people that you're diving so that you understand the situation you're getting yourself into. As in John's example, he probably could have avoided that experience of nitrogen surprise introduction to nitrogen narcosis had the right conversation direction been taken to where the more experienced diver that he was going with understood, hey, you've not been below, just throwing a number out there, 60 feet, and I'm going to take you to 120 feet, and I'm going to do it quickly. Well, I think I also would have been asking the question as the more experienced diver, do you have any challenges with equalization? Are you able to equalize quickly? Because I may say that, and I'll use myself as an example, unless I'm having issues, I equalize very quickly. So in most cases, I can get in the water and then just do a headfirst dive because I can equalize very easily. So I can get down to 130 feet within a couple of minutes, and I'm there. I can get there very quickly and with no nitrogen narcosis issues because I've done it so many times. And now somebody else I'm diving with may have gone to 130 feet before. They may do it a lot, but they may be a slow equalizer. So it may be that, hey, we just got to hang and make it a gradual drop. Okay? So it's important to have those conversations. Okay, he was correcting. He didn't mean to say that he dropped the camera because that would be horrible if you buy. Because he got a nice camera. He got, I think, the same camera we've got, and yeah, you'd hate to drop it. So he stowed the camera. Yeah, because that you don't want any. You definitely don't want to task load yourself when you're also dealing with any kind of challenge, whether it's equipment or physiological, like nitrogen narcosis. Soon as you start dealing with that stuff, you need to stop the task loading and focus, and immediately start to come up. And like I said, if you come up just a few feet, you're going to see typically the effects of nitrogen narcosis dissipate almost immediately. So again, those are excellent questions, John. And see, these are the kinds of conversations you have with people about their experiences that help you be a better diver overall. So I definitely appreciate John for sharing that bit of diving wisdom, and it gave me an opportunity to share one of my stories. So the struggle is real. Nitrogen narcosis is a thing, and it can affect you, and you may not know when it's going to come upon you, especially if you feel like you've put yourself in diving situations that normally you've not experienced nitrogen narcosis, and then something changes to make you more susceptible to it. As I said, I've been down deep many, many times in daytime, nighttime, no big deal. But here this situation was where we were deep. I was concentrating very hard on maintaining a very, very steady camera shot. And for the first time, I actually experienced full-on nitrogen narcosis, the loopiness, etc. So, again, it's just very important to have those conversations. That's really all part of the pre-dive safety check as far as I'm concerned. All right, so as we wind down here, let me hit a little bit of administrivia just in case. Next Dive Club meeting is November 19th at 7 p.m. Coming up on Thanksgiving, folks, so definitely looking forward to all of that. Of course, now that means we'll have to be on a diet so we can still fit into our wetsuits for the beginning of the new season. And so again, our Dive Club meeting, 7 p.m. Rudy's Restaurant. I may be the only one there, but that's okay. I love eating at Rudy's. We're done with dive classes for the year, but if somebody comes along and they really, really want to get it done, and I sometimes find people who hit me up in November, hey, we're going on a dive trip in February or whatever, and they want to get certified for the trip. Okay, cool. Just be aware, it's starting to get cool out there, and the water temperature is going to start to drop, and you're going to want to be prepared for diving in cold water potentially. If you're in the area and looking for air fills, you can look up Mike McCarson at Broke Mill RV Park out on Highway 90 West. Just give him a call at 830-719-2935. And also, we always put on a plug for A Pet's Wish. They need donations of money to cover costs of utilities and for veterinary bills, etc., as well as for just regular daily supplies. Or you can bring them supplies if you're in the area. That's helpful. And then, of course, your time also for helping take care of all those little animals that the dogs and cats they're taking care of. If you'd like to keep in touch with what we're doing, just visit our dive club page, delriodiveclub.com, or see what's going on. We keep things pretty active as we're doing things like dives, etc. on Facebook, so just look for Del Rio Dive Club, or you can send a message through via Skype. Just look for TGWD, and we'll be sure to respond to you. So we're helping with just additional administrivia. We're helping with the set building, etc., for the final Upstagers production for the year, the Cemetery Club. It's a very poignant but funny comedy. We got a number of new folks in the Upstagers that are stepping up onto the stage. And they're doing a great job. They're having fun with it. We just had our first weekend of set building. Of course, the weather was horrible for it. So, carrying set pieces from our building to the theater, in the rain, never a fun thing. But we got a lot done. Basically, the main part of the set is up, and now we've just got some more additional pieces to put on, masking and things like that. And then they'll have the set dressing and make it look like it's supposed to look, the interior of a house and a cemetery and things like that. So, it's, by the way, it's not a Halloween show. It's just basically about some widows who are, dealing with the grieving process, blah, blah, blah. So that's why it's the Cemetery Club. So, looking forward to that. That opens the 6th and 7th of November at the Paul Pogue Theater. So, if you're in the area and want to enjoy a nice evening with live theater, come check that out. We'll have some more information. We'll post it in as part of the Ministrivia as well, so you can see it on there. And you can also look up if you want more information, just go to upstagers.org. That's their website, and you can get more information. So it's going to be a funny show. Great talented people directing and in the show. So I think you're going to enjoy it. So that pretty much covers all that we had on tap for this week. John, thank you so much for joining us in the chat room and giving us some input. You see how that works, folks? You jump in the chat room. I watch that. You just throw some questions out there, some comments. I'm always happy to address those online as long as they're suitable for work, as they say, SFW. And again, just be aware there's a delay because of what's going on. What you see on the screen is up to maybe 30 seconds before you actually see it, because of the way Ustream works, and there's a delay. So you may be seeing something and responding to it, and I've maybe already moved on, but I have no problem jumping back to catch a reference that you've made in the chat room. So don't be bashful. We'd love to have your comments and questions and suggestions. So hope you enjoyed this episode, or if you're watching on YouTube, because we always upload the show after the show, upload to YouTube after the show is done. Hope you are enjoying it and get something out of it. Again, preparing for cold water. It's expand your dive season. Get the equipment you need for diving in cold water. Even if it's a short dive, it is worth it. It is fun. You just got to be prepared for the cold water and warming up afterwards. So, again, thank you for joining us. And barring any unforeseen circumstances, technical and otherwise, we look forward to seeing you next week at this same time for another exciting episode of This Guy Who Dives. See ya.